Your challenge as a healthcare marketer or somebody in life science is truly just how can I make amazing content for the people that I'm serving so that they can help serve the people they serve better, and how am I going to get it in front of them?
So I'm super excited about today. I have Marc Frechette, who's a good friend of mine, somebody that I really respect with a lot of experience in medical device and life science marketing.
Money is not an object, not in the sense that you have a ton of it, but you don't need a lot to get started. The worst thing you can do is give your competitor time to get in there.
He is, if not more, nerdy and geeky about the ins and outs of the tech and the data and paid campaigns and how to make them really effective for life science companies.
Our online learning would become a couple of blog posts. The blog posts from a combined set of online learning would become a book. The ebook would then promote the online learning. And so we had this self-filling content cycle.
I feel like a lot of people talk the talk, but he definitely walks the walk. So I'm super excited to have him on today to talk about metrics, leveraging data, and just running the right types of campaigns. Welcome to Lifesci Continuum. Let's get going. All right, Marc, thanks for hopping on.
Yeah.
So tell me about Defense Information School. How'd you get into this marketing? And tell me about that school. There's got to be a story there, right?
There is. I got to roll back just a little bit. I'm a second generation marketer.
Right.
My mom was a marketer. So you all had catch and like normal things you do with your parents. We as marketers know, you bring a lot of work home. So a lot of my catch with family was trade show preparation and design with mom, to a point where that just became our hangout time. Learned Photoshop, was setting up trade show booths before it was technically legal in those states, but mom's retired now, so I guess we can say that in public. And caught the bug really, really, really early. I loved that creative flair it had. I come from a creative family. And so I think like everybody who's getting a really good start in high school like that, I started an AV club. Not joined. Started. I know what you're thinking. Was this guy the coolest guy in school? Surprisingly, no. But it was just an extension of that way to like be creative while communicating. I kind of fell in love with this everything but traditional arts approach, and that included an early bug for television production and radio production, which led me to my college years where I decided to enlist instead. Shortly after 9/11. That's nice. Where I meant the Defense Information Schools. Defense Information School. So that is the school that military members go to learn how to be broadcasters as well as combat photographers and journalists. There's a few courses that go through there. It is, at least at the time, I don't know if it still is, but I presume so because it's my alma mater and I refuse to accept anything different, one of the most prestigious schools in the United States for journalism and for production. And it's one of the few schools where you'll go and you'll learn the principles of journalism, electronic journalism, doing your own camera work, doing your own audio work. So you come out of there a proper broadcast communication polymath, which really prepared me for the age of everything going online instead. So after my enlistment, got out and caught the digital marketing bug, which was this opportunity to, as you know, this opportunity to come out and be like, all right, let's blend everything we know about production, everything we know about storytelling, everything we know about nerdy techie things, and combine that with just telling a great message and communicating clearly to people. And that has been I don't want to say my comfort zone. That's been the zone that gets me most excited, even 20 years later. Has it been 20 years? It's been about 20 years later. Holy cow.
Yeah. Let's not talk about it. I don't want to go there. Because I've got at least like 10 years on you, and I just don't need to have that conversation right now.
All right. So office runs to Circuit City aside. That's been my pride and joy ever since. And I absolutely love it.
I love that. That's a great story. I mean, you know, so many people take such a different route to marketing. They come from all kinds of different backgrounds. Few people had it at the kitchen table growing up. So I love that. I think we want to talk about a few things, but you and I share a few kind of common philosophies on marketing. And I think one of the things I'd like to talk about and focus on today is leveraging education as a key part of your marketing. So give me, just for a little bit of context, give me a little bit of rundown on some of your experience in life science marketing. You're not just a B2C or B2B, but you definitely have life
Yeah,
science
I do.
experience.
So most recently, I found myself at a couple of companies in life sciences. I've been in life science for 5, 6, about 7 years now, I think. I made the jump to life sciences from the agency world. Agencies, I got to work with every possible kind of company after spending half my career it was my whole career at the time, in agencies. I was like, wow, what would happen if I get to be one of these people who get to see the campaign all the way through, be in every single meeting, be a lot more involved, focus on one brand at a time instead of my
So,
entire
so
portfolio.
I didn't know that about you. So you went right out of college right into an agency?
Uh, Sort of. I went out of college into the military. From the military, I had a small jump in a defense electronics company, and from there moved on to agency life. So yeah, I was in an agency in the second or third year after I graduated.
Got it. Okay, that's early, but very good. Thanks for sharing that. Sorry for interrupting. Keep going.
No, all good. So yeah, so I got into it pretty early with the agency stuff, but fell in love with life sciences. Had to start in what I'll call life science adjacent, over in the healthcare and not healthcare, vitamins and supplements and stuff like that. I'll call it adjacent because of the company. And then I met my first, the most crucial or influential life sciences CEO that I've met so far in my career. And I was very happy where I was my time. And this was a respiratory company. And he's like, come interview me at my house. And I'm like, I am really fine. I am okay. I sat down across from him. He's like, so do you like what you do, or do you want to come save babies every day? And like, he knew what he was doing. But that drives home for those of us in life science marketing. I can say those of us now because I agreed with them. It is nearly impossible to have a bad day where you can't reflect on helping people. In your worst day, you've done amazing stuff for somebody out there.
Yeah.
And on your best day, you've probably done it for an uncountable amount of people. That's amazing. Like, there is no, having worked with other industries through the agency life, there's not a lot of industries where you can really capture that feeling, right? Nobody goes and be like, man, really sold a lot of sedans today, changed some lives, right? But you do get to do that in life sciences.
I agree, and that's part of why I doubled down on this. We reached an inflection point around the same time frame, 7 or 8 years ago, where we were doing a lot of marketing for a lot of different industries. We actually had a client that was in spangly shoes, and it's just not the same. And it really, to be at the risk of being trite, it's a little. It gives you like a reason. It's a feel good. You feel like you're part of something meaningful and impactful. So yeah, fully agree with you there. So you've been doing this for about 7 years now. And you and I were talking the other day, and one of the things we were talking about is how important education is, and what a key role it plays in marketing in the life science. And I think that's a given. I think most companies know that, but they may not know what to do or how to do it, or the full scope of it. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you nailed it, right? Like, no one has ever sold a product or got a physician to successfully use a product without doing in services. So we know at some level that education is essential. We know that a lot of decisions and stuff like that are happening at the big conventions. So we know that education is important, but it becomes the challenge is, okay, well, how are you going to go forward and educate? How can you possibly do that, or do that, and especially do that at any appreciative scale? One of the things I did at a previous company is we had a pretty successful roadshow. Our representatives were able to pretty reliably or somewhat reliably get in there and do their in-services or do product training. Those did fairly well. And so we said, okay, well, what can we do? What can we do to really amplify that? This was quite a few years ago now, but what can we do to take that magic of an in-person in-service and really expand it? So we experimented with a few webinars, which I think is like the go-to whenever we talk about digital marketing and healthcare. We're like, oh, let's do a webinar. And the webinars were working okay. It was a lot of work, a lot of marketing, and a lot of advertising to get each webinar to be successful, which was great. But I come from an inbound marketing world, right? If you're starting from scratch every month, you're wasting some serious energy. So we said, okay, what
Yeah.
are we going to do to make this more sustainable and to actually be able to grow it? And we turned our burgeoning webinar series into an on-demand online school that was accredited to give continuing education credits for our two target audiences, which were respiratory care and nursing. So
Wow.
that had a really awkward start. There wasn't a lot of folks doing that at the time. And so we were like, okay, we got to treat this as a proper product. So we said, okay, we've got our main product as a company. We've got our respiratory care device. Additionally, we've got this other product, and we truly treated the online academy as a proper product. We said we've got to get students in. We got to make sure those students are staying engaged. We got to make sure they're taking multiple classes. We got to keep adding classes to it to make sure that they form a habit of taking it. We went so far as to start researching what each state had for continuing education requirements and building courses to better match the CEU requirements, because as a marketing move, we didn't need that. But as an online college, or as an online university, air quotes for legal reasons, as an online academy, that's absolutely what we needed to have a successful product. And it worked. It worked. And I'll say it worked in two ways. Inside of 2 years, we had more respiratory therapists in our online academy than the Professional Association of Respiratory Therapists had members, which is bananas. Yes.
That's crazy.
And additionally, we had a huge squadron of nursing professionals that were also coming through. It was a few things that just lined up. I'll say it was a little bit luck. It was a little bit planning, but it was truly that idea of treating it as a product and doing it as education that unlocked so much for us in that case. We did a lot of different courses. Only one or two of them were actually focused on our product. Many more were product adjacent. But I'll go into the product design in a second. You're eager.
Yeah, I have like a million questions for you. So I think you make an important point there, and I don't want to lose it before we get into these questions. But you're not treating it as marketing. You recognize, and I'm sort of jumping into the middle of it, but you recognize that to effectively market and grow the business, you can't treat marketing as marketing. You're treating it as a product. And a key, I guess, initiative there is to recognize respiratory therapists as the customer of that product, and that your education can't only be about your product, because if they're not using your product yet, they would have no reason to do the education if it were focused solely on your product.
Exactly. And I'll take zero credit for that kind of focus. Right. We see it with Red Bull in their Red Bulletin, right? They've got a magazine and an entertainment arm that needs to be successful on its own, but it's also heavily promoting Red Bull. We see that with John Deere, when John Deere was really getting up and running in the late 18th, early 19th, where they had their own version of a Farmer's Almanac that needed to be successful for people. And it's right? Back when you and I were first getting started in this stuff. You see it in flipping Michelin, right? And when they were trying to sell tires around France, like, we need to make something to get people out there and driving. They made a Michelin guide with stars in it. Had to be successful on its own. It was. People drove around. People got tires, to the point today where people are like, forget Michelin star? Came from Michelin tires? I think the Guinness Book of World Records suffers the same fate. So I guess there's a dark path you could go where it's so successful it becomes its own thing. I didn't think I would mind that if that became the problem for my online academy, right? If it was like, if I actually have to become an academy, fine. But in the meantime, it was doing great work promoting my brand. It was putting us in great places. And it was opening the door for us as well, because we still had our field team. We still had people out there that could do in-service, that could do additional training. And so we would use the recipients of the online learning to kind of market back at them. Be like, hey, Bill, you just came to our online learning. If you liked this course, share it with a friend, or better yet, call us. We'll come do a team training. And suddenly you've got people calling you to get your field team in there to talk to an entire team of people at a time.
Yeah. You know what? Let's hammer that one home. I really, really, because this is something, and we'll talk about this in a second, but this is something that it doesn't matter necessarily the role that I play, but convincing a founder or leadership team that you should invest in education that is adjacent to your product, but not directly educating on your product, that can be a hard sell. Um, do me a favor, give me the 30-second why that thinking is wrong, and why you want to make sure that when you're building on education, that you
Yeah.
don't solely focus on your product, you focus on the customer.
Two parts. First, the new standards of care, or the individualized standards of care, I'll say, right? Like what one practice likes to do, that's built through education. So we know education's important, but getting them to respect and listen to you as a source of education, that's very hard, nigh impossible. If all you're known for is talking about yourself, what value is there to listening to you?
Right.
And so expanding the education to be adjacent to your product and expanding from it, for us, teaching courses about how to improve your leadership, how to have difficult conversations, things that had more to do with management than it did healthcare, but we knew some people needed management CEUs, became a way a lot of people were introduced to the online academy, getting their first CEUs. And we saw a vast majority of them would go through and take the product training. It was our foot in the door. Training they didn't expect, training we knew they wanted and needed. And then they trusted us enough to listen to our product or even invite us in. That's a 45 to 1 minute. The editor might correct me there.
No, that was perfect. That was perfect. And I think that, I think that an argument from the other side is, well, they can get. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a big
Yeah.
investment for us, and they can get that information elsewhere. Why would we want to spend money? And my perspective on that is that you're right. They could get this information from anywhere, but if they get it from you, you're often at you then are placed at the beginning of their journey. You can lead them naturally, whereas if you aren't the one providing that
Yeah.
information, you miss a huge opportunity to get to them and build build trust, build a relationship with them before the sale, which any good salesperson knows.
Yeah.
You want to build that relationship before you go in to try and close the deal.
Yeah, and that's where coming at it from that, it being a product, not marketing, was such an important differentiator, at least for me and my team as we were putting it together. Because yeah, you could get this training, you could get training like this anywhere, but the same was true relatively, but the same was kind of true for our product.
Mm-hmm.
So we were like, all right, we know marketing and great product and research makes the difference in a great product. Is that a way that we can make our marketing work for us? Because yeah, they can get this from anywhere. What am I going to do to make them want to get it from us? And we did it. We did it with research. We did it by finding out how people wanted to learn, the length in which they wanted to learn it, how they wanted to engage. At the time, online learning wasn't as common, so we did have a little bit of an early start in that space. It was around enough that the software already existed, though. So we were also able to
Mm-hmm.
start this with the same investment we were doing in our monthly webinars. The demonstration version, the minimum viable product, I don't think they were meant to see, was literally just reskinning our recorded webinars, getting those approved, and offering them through simple HubSpot forms. We didn't even start with an online learning platform. Our minimum viable product was, can we sell 3 classes that connect to, or 2 or 3 classes that connect to each other, using the tools we've already got, and that worked really
So
well.
you
And we're like, yeah,
so you sold it. So let's take a step back, because I did just jump right into the middle of that, because that's just really interesting there. How did you get to the idea of this?
So for me, this was more of a team thing. And I say, I looked at what I had on my team, and I learned this from my inbound agency time, right? Where you've got superstars and experts on your team that have a unique strength in some from something. And I say this is almost more common in marketing teams than anything else. You said at the top of the call, Bill, right? People come through marketing from all sorts of strange places. I happen to have somebody on my team who started her career in educating about education. So her early passion and her expertise was how to educate, not educating, actually the art and the science of education. And she was doing a bang up job with our webinars. And I said, okay, what's the superpower I have on my team or have available to me? That was one of them. So I just wanted to amplify that individual superpower. It's a high risk move, right? Because now I'm putting everything I've got or a lot of what I've got on one person on my team and counting on them to shine. On the flip side, I know none of my competitors have that person.
Yeah.
Right. The same is true of the people on the audience's team or the partners you choose to work with, right? Like you've got some superstar talent on there with some hidden party trick that you could probably turn into something. It is likely related to what they did previously or what they love to do on the side, but I promise you it's out there.
This is sort of tangential, but there's great philosophy there. And there's a way of thinking of, well, I have to have a team. I have to do these things, and I have to fill the gaps I don't have. That's very real, right? There's certain things you need. However, I think something that gets overlooked is what are the superpowers of the team, and how can we use those to our competitive advantage, to win in a space, and how can we do that creatively? And it requires mental agility. It requires you to really be not a creative thinker, like we talked about earlier, which is more on a brand or design or crayon, whatever. But it's thinking beyond an inbound framework or an ABM framework or whatever framework technology is promoting as the hot marketing channel this week. It requires, and that's why education, I think, and content marketing still works, even though the formats and the channels and things have really changed. You talk about the 1800s. We weren't actually alive then, but close. The thinking works, but plugging those two core sort of perspectives, and that philosophy of, well, I don't have to improve or fill every gap. Why don't I look at where I win? What are my strengths? And let me pour gas on that and let it loose and see what happens. A lot of companies just don't, they don't have budgets for it. They don't think like that. I think that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, it takes two things. You got to know your people, and you got to kind of have that, like you said, mental agility. Be like, what? You get 2x2 grid, right? Like, what are my on one corner? You go, what are the secret skills my team has related to the job or otherwise? And the other side, you go, what are the core messages, the core things I need people to know, or how can I engage with them? And start filling. You're going to find yourself with a little grid, and try to put 7 ideas on the board. Cool. You've now taken care of all the obvious ones. Ideas 8 through 14 are going to be hard to come up with, but magical.
Yeah. And it really does. It does. It's something that I think is fairly rare. And I think it's also even more rare, but maybe what you alluded to in your interview, and how you were sold or pitched the role. But it does require an audience that is open to that thinking. So I have worked with people in the past who would, and I want to get into how you pitched this and how you convinced people to fund this. But I've worked with people in the past who immediately default to I'm not going to do anything that I haven't seen somebody else prove works before. Show me 3 to 5 examples of companies just like mine who've done this, and what were the results of that. And with innovative thinking like that and out of the box, like they say, well, we want out of the box thinking, and you give them out of the box thinking, and they're like, well, no, I didn't really mean that far out of the box. Like, maybe can you maybe hold the edge of the outside of the box, but not that far. Don't be leaving the room.
Yeah.
So, how did you, I mean, you probably had in at least interested audience, right?
I did. I did. I was blessed, and I know I was blessed at that particular position. I was blessed with a leadership team who was considered ourselves to be scrappy, fast, and knew we were smaller in budget and size than our top competitors. So I was blessed with a leadership team that knew that and understood the only way to outdo someone who's bigger than you is to be more nimble, to create risks, and to put your competitors in a position where they need to chase.
Yeah, 100%.
And that was a huge blessing. But that's not always been the case. That wasn't my only company. I've had many clients that have had also similar risk assessments. If you can suspend one thing, a lot unlocks, which is, does the example have to be from our industry?
Yes.
Sometimes it does, right? Like if I want to be like, hey, I want to do a great gift giving campaign for doctors, rightfully so, leadership will be like, show me someone who's done that in the past 5 years and not gone to jail, right? So sometimes it does matter,
Yeah.
but it typically won't. And what's wonderful is you as product marketers or as marketers have about 200, 150 years of history available to you, um, all rife with case studies, right? And you don't have to be able to casually throw out a reference to John Deere, but somebody else has tried something pretty similar to yours. You're talking about
Yeah.
using entertainment for sales. There's a lot there. If you talk about using education for sales, there's a lot there, including educational facilities themselves. So if you can get somebody to kind of pull off of that, that helps. I find that's especially helpful because a lot of the times when we're coming up with these brand new plans, this was the first online education of its size in my industry, right, for that space. But it wasn't the first online education. So understanding that helped me on two ways. One, I was able to point to other online schools and go, I want to do this, but I want to do this, but I want to make it free. I want to do this, but I want to make sure my classes link together. And I was able to point to the successful business models that brought other companies to the top of their food chain. For that one, I think my example was appropriately enough HubSpot. HubSpot, one of the reasons HubSpot rose to such levels it did were two reasons. One, they had a lot of early viral marketer videos because they had a superstar on their team with a hidden talent, Rebecca Corliss, a great singer, did a bunch of songs about marketing, and we all shared them like fools, sharing ads around in email. But the second was their inbound HubSpot Inbound University, Inbound Academy. I forget what it's called now, where you can go as a marketer and take online courses for free. And it's a nice intro level course that's in the realm of the thing that their product happens to do. It's a lot more product centric now than it used to be. But we were able
Yeah.
to point to that and go like, look, this kind of strategy often yields amazing results. We want to take that and make it our own. I didn't put on any airs at all about having invented online schooling, right? Which was great
Of
because
course.
that meant I could just take from everybody else who was already successful, which was a
Yep.
lot of work off my plate. So that's
Yeah.
what I did. They wanted change. They were hungry, but I said, here's other companies that have done it. They're not in our industry, but I think it can work in my industry, and here's why. In this case, it was online learning works, but we also know our particular people we're trying to get in front of are hungry for continuing education credits.
So that's a
Right.
long play. This is
Yeah.
not a company. That's not a company that comes to you and says, okay, I'm hiring you and I need X number of leads this quarter. And we're breathing down your back on
Yeah.
this. This is definitely, I think you said 2 years.
It took 2 years to hit that like full thing. We really hit our stride after about 6 months. And I think it was about that 6 month mark before we had enough data that we were able to say with a high certainty, be like, look, this is resulting in differences in use. This is resulting in sales because we can track it against orders for the product or orders against consumables. And we had put in some additional use cases that would give us immediate gains as well. So we said, hey, if people are engaging with the online college, even if they're not ready yet, once they take X amount of classes, I'm going to flag that location for the field team. So we said, yeah, it's going to take 6 months to work, but can I get something out of it in the meantime that's useful? That's not always going to be the case, but in this case it was. So we're able to say, yeah, in the meantime, we're going to use it to highlight warm leads. And then over time, we'll see how well it does on its own, apart from just being something to, tee up leads for my sales team.
So aside from salaries, every minute that you're spending on this, you're not spending on real marketing.
Yeah.
How did you budget for this? How did you get approval to make this kind of investment, both in time and resources, money?
Yeah, for our team, it was part of it was that superpower conversation. I am a technology geek, and so we were able to make the technology after our MVP. We were able to make the technology work. It cost us, I think, $150 to $200 a week to keep the lights on for our school.
Oh, that's not bad.
No. All things in processing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of certificates of completion a month. It was very cheap. That was my superpower. But it was also partly scheduling. Our webinars were already kind of a regular part of what we were doing. And we were having a hard time, as many do, right? How many times can you run the same ad or a slight variation of it? So baked into our education calendar, we basically said, okay, and you could see it was color coded as a calendar. It was like about the product for a particular group of patients that our people serve, something else management about the product. And because every X, I forget the number, I wish I'd remembered off the top of my head, because every X number of courses were either very much about the product or so close that it might as well have been, we were able to justify it as just an extension of our normal strategy. We didn't completely take off. We didn't say we're going to make something without any connections to us at all. Companies have done that. Johnson & Johnson ran I think they still run one of the most successful websites for new moms. And it's not labeled at all as a J&J website. Right. So you can do it. However, whenever it comes time to recommend a product, it's all J&J products.
Of course.
And it's successful on its own right because they sell the ad revenue and J&J gets first dibs, but not all dibs. But anyways, so that's how we justified the cost for it. We said, we think it's going to work. We know it's going to, but we made concessions in the planning ahead of time to say, okay, what can we do to say we're launching this new thing and still kind of keep up? Our ads at the time were largely awareness based anyways. So it wasn't a huge jump to say, all right, as long as we've got ads going out there about courses, if we can get people into the course, that's great. So it just became a way of, the pitch for it was kind of making more engaging ads to a limited extent, as a fun alternative to expecting people to come from an ad that they saw on Facebook during their 10 minutes that they had a break for, and then hoping they'd fill out a form to maybe have your salesperson call them.
That's a tough sell.
It is. So we did this instead, and we found a lot more people willing to use their short amount of time to fill out a sign-up form.
Yeah, and I think there are two sort of hidden points there. One, it's infinitely easier to advertise education than it is a product. So if you're running your ads that are themselves educational or entertaining, but that's a different conversation. But if they're educational, and we find these really successful, but then they're marketing education, people are more likely to engage with that. Their defenses go down a little bit. And they're just more interested in learning. In most industries, there's a continuous desire and need to learn something new or to refresh or revisit. And so I think that those campaigns are more effective in building audiences to then engage and warm up long term. So rather than, I see sometimes coming into, an engagement, and a leadership team will just want to run ads and run product ads, do things like SEO. There are a lot of tactics they just want to get into right away. And where I try to steer them Two, because I know it works and I know long term it's a healthier, it's a more sustainable strategy, is to lead with and market the heck out of education. And it takes different forms for different companies. But I don't know if it's, you call it a parallel, but if you think about any of these like industry websites that sell to an audience type, like there's a publication, like an online publication, and I use that term super loosely, but they're for like lab managers, and maybe they have a print version, but it's really just a website, and it's all blogs that are topical to products that sell to lab managers. If you think about the need for that and the justification and the investment, it's the same idea. They're lightly using education and SEO and some tools there to market products that they're probably getting some sort of sale on. If you can take that thinking and that strategy and apply it solely to your audience and in your business, you can bypass that middleman. So I think there's a whole conversation there, but it's that idea, and I think it's easier to justify if you take the right approach, which I think you did.
Yeah, one of the other things we did that helped, because this, I can't. I'm proud to be a member of a very large marketing organization now, but at this company, I was part of a very small marketing organization, and we also had a blog, social media. We were trying to do email, all at the same time. One of the things in education almost uniquely has an opportunity for this, that if you had tried entertainment, it wouldn't necessarily fly. By the way, you can be entertaining and education at the same time, like a podcast. But one of the things we did is we said, okay, kind of like when you buy a turkey a little bit too big at Thanksgiving, when I'm buying this, when I'm setting it up, when I'm first cooking it, I'm already thinking of how I'm going to use what's left over. So I'm investing a lot of time to get a physician on a call with me to do this webinar, to learn about their thoughts. I also want to make sure that I can take that, and we would very much take each blog post. Our goal, often we exceeded this, our goal is to get for every conversation that would become a learning opportunity, or every learning opportunity, because we would develop the courses. We also had a webinar. We tried to split it off into at least 2 or 3 related blog articles. And we would filter those out, right? So we wouldn't do all the blog articles at once. We'd write them all at once because it was fresh in our mind. But I'd say, okay, on month 1, I'm publishing article 1. On month 2, I'm publishing article 3, article 2, 3, etc. So we have this chain. I'm doing 1 to 2 classes a month, by the way. So after we started having a couple of classes, I've now got a full blog with a new post every week. And every post is talking about another course that's already there if you find this particular blog interesting. And then what we do is, after some time, we take a look at our blog post and say, okay, what do we have that's starting to share certain themes? And honestly, it was just like click the keyword filter. We were WordPress based. Click the keyword filter and like, what do I got a lot of? I've got a lot of those. All right, let's take the best of that and turn our blog into a book. And so we would take our online learning would become a couple of blog posts. The blog posts from a combined set of online learning would become a book. The ebook would then promote, come on over to the online learning. We'd keep making online learning. And so we had this self-filling content cycle. The whole time was being backfilled with evergreen content, because as we went, we said we want to include the latest, but we don't want to be time bound. It was really tempting to be like, here's the summer issue. But if we knew we did a summer issue, it was useless to us after the summer. And so that was a huge part of being able to maintain the success on a small team and almost no budget.
I think that life science companies struggle sometimes thematically. You know, a lot of industries, there's seasonality. And for life sciences, seasonality is budget and purchasing time. And you just can't, thematically, that's terrible. And so question though, I was actually having another conversation about content mapping and planning, and looking at being intentional about the customer journey, understanding that while we might plan it linearly so that we don't leave any gaps, however somebody goes through that journey, it looks like, in her words, spaghetti. It's all over the place. So you kind of want to be there wherever they are in whatever format they want. It sounds like the course content was the hub. It was the core, and it was the driver for your content map. And the content sort of came out of that naturally by extension of that.
A little bit. It was actually, we had a inability to put our phones on mute before recording a podcast episode. We also had a franchise model, which is starting to become more and more common in life sci now. So I had a franchise. So I had a small sect of the marketing and product team that was dedicated to the emergency room, another group of people that were dedicated to different departments throughout the hospital and different segments of patients. And we turned those audiences into our content roadmap in terms of theming. So yes. In addition to saying, hey, we're going to talk about the product, a little bit away from the product, and then something that's not necessarily inclusive of our product, and sprinkling in management on top of that, management training. That became our roadmap. And that was really the underlying theme for most of our content as we went forward. And you could even, we tried to not make it so obviously candy striped, but I definitely did look back at it with some time and distance. And I was like, oh yeah, no, we kind of, because the new content was like, it's adult month, it's pediatric month, it's COPD month. And so we had these months in our creation. So from the inside, it felt like we were falling into an accidental theme. Our splitting apart the creation from the publication date meant we could maintain a mix. Yes. So while we internally were like, we're on a theme, because that always happens, to our outside audience, we were always everywhere, which was really important because not all of the physicians that we wanted to talk to dealt a lot with pediatric patients. We had one of our biggest audiences were neonatal intensive care, which is incredibly niche from an HCP's perspective. They're wildly passionate individuals, and we have to put all our effort into the content for them. But content for them doesn't matter to the rest of the group, largely doesn't matter to a lot of other HCP audiences. And so being able to separate the publish date from the creation date, especially with that support and content, let us save sanity and focus on one thing at a time without our publication schedule ever showing that sit.
That's a really good point, because there are a few things that get a lot of screen time in marketing. And one is customer journey mapping, and we think of it linearly, even though through the customer actual experience, it's more like spaghetti. And then on the actual production side, I think that thematically having a focus for each month, a topic or theme, can help you have focus, but be efficient with your content production. Yeah. So if this month is, neonatal, then you can coordinate all of your resources and your assets, and you can focus, and your head's in that space, and you can get into a flow with work, and you can concentrate and really be efficient and do more, but a higher level of quality, because you're immersed in that for a period of time. But on the other side, if you were just to say, hey, February is neonatal month, well, everybody else is, somebody who's new, who's not in that, who hits you in February, and be like, this isn't for me. And then the next time you show up, they may disregard you out of hand. So I think rolling it out over time, it keeps things fresh, but it makes sure that even though you have intent with your strategy, from the outside perspective, there is a nice mix and a blend, and you don't get pigeonholed at one point in time.
Yeah. And then because we were treating it as a product, not as a marketing thing, it wasn't a matter of like, well, how long are we going to let the ads for the Having Difficult Conversations course stay up? until they
Right.
stopped giving us students. Was
Yes.
really it, right? We had an amount we wanted to spend to get somebody in. Over time, we were able to true that up to our business to be like, okay, how much should we actually spend to get a student? What makes sense for our business? And as long as a course was delivering students at that, we'd have the same, not the same ad. We'd be still advertising a course a year after if it was something that new students were continuing to find and continuing to sign up for. Similarly, if I had a brand new course that bombed, and no one wanted it, we didn't advertise it, but we do the first month, try the second month in case there was a holiday we didn't know about that skewed things up. And if it didn't work, it didn't work. We left it in because people would find it organically, but we'd be like, yeah, let's not put our money behind this course. Let's move on to the next thing. So,
Yeah.
to add to the spaghettification, even our ads didn't carry much of a time-based theme to it. It's just, if it worked, it worked. I will say that was before some significant Meta and LinkedIn updates. So the translation to that nowadays would probably be to start and stop multiple versions of the ad every 8 minutes or so. But to refresh the ads much more frequently than you could get away with years ago when this was the case, because now they are much more hungry platforms for the creative and the amount of creative you put in.
Yeah, and there are a lot of places that you can and should be, and that's a whole conversation where we get into, or we could get into the audience and where they're spending their time. We see a lot of people making judgments based on their behavior, and thinking that they're a good avatar for their buyer because
Yep.
I'm not on Facebook, so I shouldn't market on Facebook. So anyway, there's a whole big conversation
Right.
there. So on education, using education in your marketing, I would make the point again that it's easier to market education. The barriers to getting through to the buyer are lower, and if you can actually use education as your marketing. So, if you have some content that you can extract and use to run in the feed as the ad, as opposed to, so just briefly, we had a client that just, they had been around for about 7 years and they were having a tough time getting traction. And then COVID hit. And so they couldn't get into hospitals anymore. And so in meeting with their leadership team and leading with their top sales performers, one thing that brought out some interesting insights is, what do you wish they knew before you got into the conversation with them? And they just said the science. We spend 45 minutes of 50 minutes, if we have that, explaining the science. And then once they understand the science, they get it and they want it. But if we could have them understand that before we get in, and the consensus with the team was, we're never going to get them to learn about the science because they simply don't care. And we took their pitch, we took their training, we took a deck that they used at conferences, we turned that into an educational video, and we just ran that video as an ad to that audience. And they went crazy for it. So I think there's a bridge that needs to be built there, in understanding that a big part of our job as marketers is education, and the salespeople on the front line, and they already know this, but I think the focus is too much maybe on lead gen and not so much on what and how people really, really buy. Even in this space.
Here's my favorite, and I think this is something I shared with some previous folks too, is specifically for healthcare, in terms of like, is education a way to sell, or do people want it and care for it, especially if there's not going to be whatever. If you're selling to hospitals specifically, you're not dealing with an organization that's made of a ton of money, and yet the individuals there or the hospitals will sponsor thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to fly their healthcare professionals out to the next event so that they can take some training and attend a conference. And a conference is largely training. Even the dinner events are training, right? And education. So if that's the big expected annual expense, what power does it unlock if you're rolling up offering a great educational experience at no cost?
Yeah.
If they'll spend thousands on it otherwise, or for similar, and that hopefully gives folks permission to at least try it, make an honest effort into it. It's not easy, but it's also, education is so prevalent in so many markets now, that you could learn, you could give yourself a masterclass in how to sell education by watching masterclass, like how masterclass tries to sell masterclasses. Fall
Yeah.
into masterclass's lead funnel and then copy their homework. They won't mind. um, right? And and that's what I love about it so much, is it's so ubiquitous across every industry, that your challenge as a healthcare marketer or somebody in life science is truly just, how can I make amazing content for the people that I'm serving so that they can help serve the people they serve better, and how am I going to get it in front of them? You don't have to invent any of the other things. You can if you want to, but there's no bonus points, because every other industry has already solved this for us. In life
Yeah.
sciences, we're just slower to get to it as brands. I think a lot of that is, it's harder to give continuing education credits. And there's this idea that I can only offer education if I'm offering a CEU. And when we look at the infotainment space for, especially for healthcare providers, we know that's not the case, because they
Right.
have wildly successful podcasts, wildly successful Facebook groups, and off organization things where they share and interact and have great educational content that they don't get official credit for, and they love it. They dedicate their personal time to consuming it. You can do
Yeah.
this. You've got
I,
this.
100%. And picking up on that, and I know we're close to time here. Uh, I have a client right now that's looking at the investment. They have a number of product lines. They're pretty disconnected, and they're looking at the investment to spin up in-house media. And
Hmm.
when you add it all up, it's not a huge investment, but I think it's a little bit more of the idea of getting something like that spent up rather than the dollars. But I think one of the things to consider is that when you spin up like a media platform for one product line, you now have all of the framework to deploy that for every product line that it
Yeah.
makes sense for. So there's a scale there that I think that's an easy leap, but initially there's a lot of friction in, oh, we don't have a person for that, or we don't have the equipment for that, or where are we going to do that? And there's a lot of stalling with these very very small problems and dealing with inertia and those types of things. So I think there's a lot of opportunities still. I think the ceiling is super high on this. So it's I'd love to hear your thoughts on all that. Is there anything, as we wrap up, is there anything, if you could go back a few years to before you started this, that you would say to younger you, like, hey, as you're starting out on this, make sure you do this?
Ooh. Ooh. Yeah. Possibly two. And it's funny because I think you know me as a data guy, but I wasn't always. The first is, while my brain was still pliable, I wish I had taken an MBA level course in statistics,
Hmm.
because I find that is, now that I've shoved it in there the hard way, I find that is unlocking all new superpowers for me personally. Being able to look at the data, being able to run my own media mix models, to understand what these models mean when the agencies I work with are presenting them to me, and to challenge the data that I'm being presented. Uh, Most of the aha moments I've had as a professional in the last few years have come from giving myself the gift of an advanced ability compared to what I used to have for reading and understanding data. I've always been an analytics guy, but I didn't get into statistics until much more recently. And yeah, had I had this earlier in my career, I do not know where I would be, but this particular room would probably be much larger. Um,
Well
so
said. Well
yeah,
said. I love that. I love that. And last one, what would you maybe what would you avoid? What would you have? Is there anything um, like something to keep an eye out? So think about somebody starting this from scratch. Are there any potholes or obstacles that you could give a heads up and say, just watch out for this, proceed with caution?
yeah. I had a stop at a company that brought me in to help them with their media empire, and they'd already started a particular direction. Um, but this was before 2020, and I'll get to why that matters in a second. We had spent so much on equipment that even with the best estimate, it was going to be years before any content play was going to be profitable. And when I say so much, we had this was a foray out of life sciences for me, and we had $1 million test kitchen. This was in a food and beverage industry.
Wow.
We had something that would rival anything the Food Network would have, but we did not have millions of dollars in advertisers coming to us for it. And
Wow.
and I got there when they were halfway through building it and kept building it. And I think one of the most impactful things I could have done looking back is go, hey, maybe we just start with an iPhone and some good lights, see what happens.
Right.
Because I've done that. My at previous stops, I've been like, this is the best I've got. We've got no money, and so you buy the backdrop on Amazon, hope for the best. You get some good lights. Now they're LED, so you don't have to cook your talent, which is lovely. And you just go.
Yeah.
The the bar has changed, hasn't
Yeah.
gotten lower, hasn't gotten higher. The bar for video production work, if consumed on the internet, changed considerably with the pandemic, largely because of the realities of working from home and forcing a lot of mainstream media to also broadcast out of their living rooms and out of their apartments. And you look back, and before 2020, it was very uncommon to see even a set like this, right, Bill? Like, we would have done this audio only, or would have gotten
Yes.
together at a recording studio.
Yep.
And now we go, that's needless, but we need really high quality cameras, or the best I've got. I'm sorry if I look a little bit like I'm on The View.
You look
Um,
great.
and a
The
good,
View.
but with some good lights, a good
Yeah.
camera, and a decent microphone, you've unlocked pretty much everything else. Because what are you going to do for your screens and your animations, right?
Right.
Keynote or PowerPoint. You can get started pretty cheaply. I'll say, if I could give you any advice to somebody who's looking to do that now, um, invest in good lights, invest in a decent camera, and invest in an amazing microphone.
Yeah.
People can
The
forgive you
basics.
being a little bit out of people can forgive you being a little out of focus. Trying to use the recording you have from the far side of the amphitheater from the recent event that you spoke at is probably not gonna work well, and people aren't gonna watch it. Um,
I'm glad you have that story too, because we sent a client who was being very budget shy out to do some of their own shooting, and they took a lot of unusable video because they did not use the microphone that they purchased for that actual application. So
yeah,
it's crazy, the stories, but you make a really good point too. And I think the pandemic had a big impact on that. And also, I mean, everybody has a high end camera with them at all times now. I mean, okay,
yeah,
most people, not everybody has, the latest and greatest, but the last 3 or 4 years, those cameras have gotten really good. And our, we want to learn.
yeah,
And if it's about substance. So if the production value isn't perfect, but the content is there, that's really what's important. I mean, it can't be trash.
yeah,
But we recently did a in B2B, we did a user generated content campaign where the client, basically everybody took their own phones and set them up at their desk and shot some video of themselves doing the thing that we were talking
yeah,
about.
yeah,
And that campaign is their best campaign performance wise, every metric, most views, longest sessions, at every metric, that's their best campaign, and it's all shot on their own devices. So we do hear a lot of, well, I need to get this set up and I need to have this exact perfect and I need to do this, and pretty soon it's 6 months later, you haven't shot a minute of footage, and you haven't gotten out there and engaged and educated your audience, and so you've just missed that opportunity. So I love that. This ran way longer than I thought it was going to.
Sorry, everyone.
No, I was awesome. Okay. Any parting thoughts? Anything we didn't talk about for this one that you want to make sure you chime in on? Remember, this is marketing Mark. I didn't just say that.
Oh, it's okay. It's my license plate as a marketer. Eventually, you just lean into the stuff. Oh God, this is gonna be so overplayed in after school. But I can't stress it enough. Either your team, or you're your team with a little bit of help. You can do it. If you need help convincing somebody in leadership, you can do that. Or with a little help from someone else, you can. Money is not an object, not in the sense that you have a ton of it, but you don't need a lot to get started. The worst thing you can do is if you want to do education, the worst thing you can do is give your competitor time to get in there. Because right now, you're just trying to be the best you can do. And that's pretty easy to start out with. If you let your competitors beat you to it, you're going to have to do better than the head start they've already got, which is significantly harder to start in on. So get in there before your competitors can, and don't overthink it. Think it just enough.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Bill. Bye, everyone.
So if you're a life science leader or product manager and you have an interesting story you'd like to share, reach out to me on LinkedIn and we'll connect. If you're interested in learning some other lessons in marketing for life sciences or in avoiding some of the big mistakes, I cover a lot of that in my LinkedIn newsletter. So I'll drop the links to those in the description below. That's it. That's the end.